Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming coordinator for the Osterville Village Library. Thank you so much for joining us today on this rainy Saturday, not a beach day. And to our friends joining us by Zoom, thank you so much for being here as well. Today, I am excited to introduce local author Van Northcross. Van was born and raised in the South, a graduate of the University of Mississippi. He has lived in New England his entire adult life, working in marketing and public relations. With a foot in both parts of the country, he brings a unique perspective to this. His first work of fiction. He lives on Cape Cod with his wife, Wendy, and cat, Sandy. Van will bring us into the captivating world of his inaugural book, a thrilling murder mystery set both on Cape Cod and in the Deep South. I am proud to introduce Van Northcross with Never Fought a Creature.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Van Northcross. That's my name right down there. And I know some people think using the first initial is something of an affectation, W. Van Northcross, but my full name is actually Walter Van Trees Northcross. And I've never been called Walter in my life. I've always been Van, so. But it seems like ever since I've retired, people want me to be Walter everywhere I go. So I started using the W, so maybe they would use the Van. But even in my book, the Southern Plantation down there, I call it the Van Trees Plantations. That's where that came from. Yeah, I wrote a book. The kind of a bucket list kind of a thing to do, but it's a murder mystery. It's set here on Cape Cod. There's no truth to it. It's totally a made-up story. But let me tell you a little bit just about myself to kind of set the table a little bit. I've learned a lot about writing books and publishing books in the course of this, but I've been writing just about my entire life. The first job I ever had out of college, I was a copywriter for a media group that had 40 daily newspapers all out west, 8 western states. And I lived and worked in that part of the world for a year before I moved to New England, and I've been here ever since. I had a 22-year career in retail advertising, working for the Puritan stores here on the Cape. And then I left there in '93, and I had a 23-year career at Cape Cod Hospital, Cape Cod Healthcare, doing marketing, physician relations, government relations, that sort of thing. And I had a lot of experience with writing press releases, writing physician profiles, writing every day, writing on deadline. Some of the best things I can say about some of the work I did was I turned it in on time. I wasn't particularly proud of the way it was written, but at the end of the day, at the end of about 45 years, I realized I was something of a trained writer. So I decided when I retired that it would be fun to write a work of fiction with no deadlines, no pressure, no limited by space, no limit to the number of words I could use. I could just let it roll. And anything that came to mind or anything like that, I could go ahead and put it in there. So my novel is fiction. It's a story I made up about a fictional town here on Cape Cod. I called it Shagport. But anybody that lives around here is going to recognize it. So it's Chad. Just don't tell anyone, okay? It's not really much of a secret. There's let me just leaving anything out here. There's, one thing I recognized when I first moved here, and I'm reminded of it constantly, still having family down south that I visit and things like that. I grew up in the 1950s in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was like really the height of the Jim Crow era down there. Um, Black people just didn't have a lot of rights. And it wasn't really a civil rights thing, it was by law. Everywhere I went, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, going to a department store, you'd go anywhere, there'd be 4 restaurants. And above the restaurant, they would say white men, colored men, white women, colored women. It would even be stenciled on the wall, like the 2 water fountains, white and colored. And it's just one of the first things I wanted to read was white men. Didn't want to be in the wrong bathroom, you know, and when you're that age, when you're like 6, 7, 8 years old, you don't know any different. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's the way the adults are teaching you when you just say, no, that's just what I have to do. But when I moved to New England, well, actually, when I entered the University of Mississippi in 1965, it was just 3 years after James Meredith had entered school, and Bobby Kennedy, then the Attorney General, had to order federal troops into Mississippi to have James Meredith put in the University of Mississippi. And there was a riot, and people were killed. And 3 years later, here I'm showing up as a freshman in that same school. But the following year, my sophomore year, Bobby Kennedy came to the Ole Miss campus. And he made a speech that I attended that I'll never forget. It really kind of set me on a different path at that time. But people were asking me about that. Of course they would, you know, when you were Attorney General and you and the President ordered the federal troops in, how did that happen? How did that go down? And he ducked the question a couple of times, but finally he said, all right, you want to know what happened? I'll tell you what happened. He said, we called Governor Ross Barnett and we said, this man's going to enter this university. And you can do it the hard way or you can do it the easy way. But if I had to, you know, whatever we have to do, he's gonna enter that university. So he said it turned into a negotiation. Ross Barnett, then governor of Mississippi, wanted federal agents to escort James Meredith to the Lyceum Hall. And so the pictures could be seen him yielding to federal authorities. And they said, well, all right, we'll have a federal agent company. He said, no, but then I want the guns drawn. I want them to draw guns and hold guns on me. And by this time, everybody in the audience is laughing. They're laughing at Governor Ross Barnett. They're loving Bobby Kennedy. And they said, no guns. We're not going to do any guns. Nobody's drawing guns. And the story went on from there, but it really got me thinking about a lot of different things. And when I first moved to New England, I came up here between my junior and senior years for the first time, working on the boats to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. That was my first introduction to Cape Cod. It was a terrible summer. It was earlier that spring, Dr. Martin Luther King had been assassinated in my hometown, Memphis, Tennessee. I was here actually in June when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in California. And then in July, of course, we had the Democratic Convention in Chicago, which turned into a riot. It was a tough time for the country. It was a tough election year. But I was amazed at the lack of empathy that some people in this area of the country had. I had it in my head that everybody in New England was a flaming liberal and, you know, loved all people and all races. And it was stunning to me to realize that that wasn't necessarily the case. But, you know, on the other side of the coin, everybody around here thinks everybody down south is a gun-toting moron that accuses women and gets off on blood sports, you know, and that's also not true. I know many empathetic people in the South, my own family included. Um, so it's been a little bit of a developing theme over the last 50 years, a lot of which found its way into my book. It's not what the book is about. The book is strictly a story that I made up. It's a murder mystery, and it's total fiction, and it moves along very nicely without getting involved in any of these issues. If you don't care about them and don't want to think about them, it's fine. It won't interfere with the story. But there were a couple of themes that I did want to discuss in the book, and that was one of them. And the way I came to that was, well, one of the things I worried about in my book was this plantation in my book that's down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and the cast of characters that are living on that plantation, the minority people that are living down there. I worried that people reading my book wouldn't believe that in the first quarter of the 21st century, people are still living like that. And I'm here to tell you, they do. They absolutely do. There are some people in this country, in the South, that are absolutely stuck. And they have no way out. They really don't. The part of the country I grew up in, the Mississippi Delta, which they say goes from the lobby of the Peabody Hotel, where the famous ducks are, down to Fish Street in Vicksburg, Mississippi. That's the reach of the Mississippi Delta, which has been flooded by the Mississippi River for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And it's built up some of the most lush, some of the richest farmland you'll find anywhere in the world. The only thing that even compares to it is the Nile River Valley in Egypt, where the famous Egyptian cotton comes from. Well, cotton grown in the Mississippi Delta is every bit that luxurious. And it provided a very genteel life for certain plantation owners and landowners in that part of the world for many, many years, but no more. The advent of technology, a single tractor, the way they're made today, with all the attachments you can put on it and everything, can displace 8 working farming families. But it's even worse than that, because the vast tracts of land, the areas that are 750,000 acres that are farmed by corporations, they have machines that can plant hundreds of acres in a couple of hours. These machines cost $1 million or more a piece, and they're used for 1 or 2 weeks out of the year. And there's no way that a working farmhand or a working family can compete with that. And now these are people that did not have access to a good education. They did not have access to developing any skills. All they know is farming. And they can't afford the farmland, and nobody's going to hire them for work when you've got these great machines doing all that work. So there they are. They're stuck. Where are they going to go? They have no skills. They have no education. They have no way out. They're just there. And some of those people are characters in my book. Believe it. It's true. Another thing that I wanted to work into my book, again, that's not what the book is about. It's just a story. It's just a murder mystery. If Netflix buys it, it's going to be a good movie too. But I've got a lot of important women in my life. Both my grandmothers, my mother, my sister, my wife, Wendy, my daughter, Alexis, my 2 granddaughters, Kate and Lainey. Another thing I just wanted to take a look at in my book was misogyny. I have no patience with it whatsoever. we probably do better in this country than a lot of places in the world with the way women are treated, but we still have a long way to go. And there was a twist in my book that hopefully it'll make the reader confront their own attitudes about things of that nature. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you what it is. You got to read the book. But I know it has the desired effect that I had, because I've had people that I know, and they reach that point in the book and they'll call me up and say, wow, didn't see that coming, which is kind of fun for me, but it also tells me that the point was made, Another thing I wanted to take a little bit of a look at was sharks. I think sharks are, never fault a creature. They're kind of misunderstood. They're really not killers. They're just ancient fish that have been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. And they're just surviving. They've got to eat like every other creature, and that's all they're trying to do is find something to eat. They're looking for fat seals. They're not looking for people. But if you want to dress up in a wetsuit and go out, paddle out 100 yards on the surfboard, you could get mistaken for a fat seal, and get bit. So you need to be a little bit smart about it. I want to read you a little bit of just one little passage from the book. Again, I didn't want to get preachy about sharks, but I've got a shark attack in the book that's important to the plot development. And I didn't want to throw sharks under the bus. So I have a scene here where there's been a murder, and the head of the Chamber of Commerce, who's a very attractive middle-aged woman, who goes to see the police chief. I'm not sure where I got the inspiration for that, but goes to see the police chief, ostensibly to bring him up to speed on a meeting that he missed about sharks, a public service meeting that he was too busy investigating the murder to attend. So she called him up and made an appointment to come see him and bring him up to speed. But she's really there to tell him that you got to solve this murder mystery because it's affecting tourism and all kinds of things. But so that's the kind of the setup. But here she is talking to the police chief. She said, it's just a creature doing what comes naturally. People need to be aware that sharks live in the ocean. They've been there for hundreds of thousands of years and will not be leaving anytime soon. It isn't just the beaches. If you go out on the ocean on a paddleboard or in a small boat like a kayak, you need to think about what could happen. And if people get into a shark's environment and act like seals, like surfers do in wetsuits, they have a good chance of being mistaken for food instead of fools. Sharks aren't evil. They aren't killers. Like any animal, they need to eat to survive. That was the takeaway message. Let's respect them as fellow creatures and be smart about how we encounter their world. And the chief says, these things are easy enough to spot from the air. I don't see why we can't just shoot them. Oh, believe me, she said, that was brought up at the meeting. The Shark Conservancy people threw the question to the marine life folks, and they gave us a long-winded tutorial on seagrass. Seagrass? Yep, seagrass. It seems that seagrass is just as important to the planet as the Amazon forest is to the health of the Earth's oceans and atmosphere. And sea turtles eat seagrass, and the sharks feed on the sea turtles. So if you start killing off the sharks and the sea turtle population explodes and keeps feeding on the seagrass, that won't be good for the planet or for any living thing on Earth or in the oceans. It's all connected. You can't go around killing off one species without causing some unintended consequence to others. Now that's true about seagrass. It was just a little fun fact that I came across, and I thought I would throw it in my book for what it was worth. Again, If you don't like it, you can just ignore it. It doesn't interfere with the story at all. It moves on after that. So, but I do think that it's something that maybe people will spend a couple of minutes considering. So that, I wanted to read you a little bit of the prologue too. It's like the setup to the whole book. Again, this is about a young neurosurgeon at Cape Cod Hospital. Had went to medical school, got the specialty in neurosurgery, now had to pick a place to live and work. So came here to Cape Cod. Peyton knew there'd be an income difference on the Cape over other areas of the country, but money was never a motivating factor. Sooner or later, when the operating room was finished for the day, when patient rounds were complete and it was time to go home, what better place to be? I'm just saying. It was an easy decision for the newly minted, well-traveled neurosurgeon. Peyton chose Cape Cod. Even though the dedicated, heavily scheduled doctor had little time to look for love, as the practice ramped up in both reputation and new patients, love found a way, blindsiding Peyton. The affair was as welcome as it was exciting and unexpected. The quickly developing relationship was in that magical state of exploration and discovery. After years of stormy seas, life was finally settling into sunny days of smooth sailing. Neurosurgery was a well-respected specialty within the medical staff as well as in the community. Peyton was an emerging rock star and falling in love. The past seemed far behind in a distant state. It was not to be. On a blissfully calm, enchanted evening came walking out of the past, unrecognized and inexplicable, stalking Peyton Palmer. And we're off. That's how we get into the book in the prologue. So, all in all, I would have to say writing this book was a good experience. It was kind of a bucket list thing to do, like I said, after I retired. Well, actually, for the last 40 years of marriage, things will occur to me, and I'll tell a story that, like most wives, I think Wendy probably feels like she's heard all my stories. But every now and then I'll come up with something that'll just floor her. She'll say, wow, never heard that story before, you know. I'll come up with a name of somebody that I knew well down south, and she doesn't believe it's a real name. She thinks that I made it up. But she was constantly saying, you got to put that in your book. I wasn't writing a book, so I had no book to put it in. But after I retired, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I did. I wrote the book. It's in the Library of Congress, so I can check that off my bucket list. It's all done. I feel a lot of ownership of the characters. I like the characters that I put in this book. Some of them were mashups of people that I've actually known in my life, but 3 or 4 different people into one. But since the book has been out, I've had tens of people clamoring for a sequel to it. And they've even suggested to me what the characters could do beyond this book, which gets my back up a little bit because these are my characters. I will decide what happens here. You know, I'm very gratified to have a response like that to my story. So, how many of you have read the book? Wow. Well, I hope you all read it, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope Netflix buys it. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or talk about any part of this further if anybody's interested.
How long did it take you to do it?
I get asked that a lot, and it's a difficult question to answer because I started writing it almost immediately after I retired. And I pretty quickly got bored with it and said, I had about 80 pages written and I said, nobody's ever gonna care about this, you know. Do I really want to do this? I would go away from it, sometimes for months at a time. But then something would happen and I'd start thinking about it again. I'm like, well, that's good. That's good, you know. And I'd go back to it and work on it for a while. But I had it, you know, first I had 100 pages and then I had like 200 pages and I had 250 pages. And sometime early last year, I said to Wendy, look, let's, as Yoda would say in Star Wars, do or do not. There is no try, you know. It's like, let's finish this thing and see what happens. So I did. I finished it. I don't think, I don't know, I can't speak for other writers. I really can't, but I doubt that any one of them would tell you they ever finished the book. Every time I ever went back in and started reading again, I changed things. I would add, subtract, something else would occur to me. I'd rearrange things. Sometimes I'd be laying in bed in the middle of the night, thinking about it. I'm like, well, that makes no sense. You know, that's completely out of the timeline, you know, nobody's going to believe that. And I couldn't wait to get on the computer in the morning and fix something like that, you know. But the other thing that any writer, I think, really needs is a good editor. And boy, I had two of them, and I acknowledged them in the book. My good friend Tom Lynch, who was Barnesville town manager, he was a state representative. He was the first one to ever read my complete manuscript. And we went to breakfast at the Daily Paper in Hyannis one morning. And he sat down with me, he had 67 notes written down about my book. He had read every single page of it, and he had all these suggestions. And most of them were very good, and most of them I took to heart and adjusted accordingly. But and the other friend I have that I'm grateful to is Gary Pastor. He, some of you may know him, for years he published the Register newspaper in Yarmouth. Lives in West Barnstable. He's a good newspaper man. He's a good editor. And he took my manuscript a year ago, February, and read it line by line. He gave it back to me, and there wasn't, I don't think there was a line in the manuscript that didn't have a note on it. A lot of it was grammar or spelling or something like that, but I'll never forget, there was one whole page. He had circled the entire page, and he wrote in the margin, "This makes absolutely no sense." So I read it, you know, I knew what I was trying to say, and I read it, and I said, you know, he's right, it don't make any sense. So I had to completely rewrite it to get across what I was trying to get across. So a long-winded answer to your question took me about 6 years. But my next book isn't going to take me that long because I'm a little more into, you know, the whole rhythm of writing, things like that. Plus, COVID helped me a lot, being stuck at home. You know, the first couple of years after I retired, we did a lot of travel, particularly international travel. But yes, ma'am.
I'm interested in the, how you came up with the graphic for your cover.
A very talented graphic artist down in Delaware named Karen O'Keefe. We went, you know, we went back and forth on it quite a bit. I could show you some of the early drafts that she was suggesting for a cover. But one of them was just, it was kind of scary. It was just, you saw like a beach scene and the water looked kind of choppy and you see all these shark fins. And the sign said no swimming, you know, and I'm like, no, it's not a book about sharks, you know. Yeah, sharks are in it, but that's not what it's about. And then she came up with something very similar to this cover, but the shark head was like looking straight on, and you couldn't even really tell it was a shark. It just looked grotesque, you know, and I was like, no, that's interesting, but we're not there yet, you know, and so finally, she had made a couple of other suggestions, and I put them together and said, the guy in the shark skin suit, that's cool, I like that. Can you stick a gun in his pocket? She said, sure, I can do that, you know, so that's what we came up with. And it was a process, but she's a very talented graphic artist. Karen O'Keefe is her name. I really have to give her the credit for that. But I get a lot of comment on the cover. A lot of people seem to like the cover, and I don't know if they're ever going to read the book. You know, John Grisham, the famous mystery writer John Grisham, he once made a comment that he was a famous author in a country where nobody reads. Which I don't understand what he's saying. I've had a lot of people congratulate me on publishing the book, but they haven't read it, and I don't think they have any intention of reading it. So, but it's fine. It's not my retirement plan. Which I'm sure Bob McAllister is glad to hear. He actually worked on my retirement plan for about 40 years. Anybody else? Well, yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about your maybe early influences on maybe a mental illness. You presumably read Faulkner, went to his house for trips to buy.
I once memorized Faulkner's acceptance speech when he was given the Nobel Prize in Literature. I went to a prep school in Middle Tennessee, which you've never heard of, but it was kind of prestigious, and one of the things we had to do was do declamation. You're not memorized. I'm sorry, you just triggered a Faulkner memory. Go ahead.
No, I just wondered, I mean, I grew up in the West, I read Faulkner, I had no idea. I couldn't decipher the parents. I mean, they would have, but I didn't know if it was black or white or mixed or whatever. Hard to read, I mean, hard to understand. Was it much easier for you? I mean, living there, or, you didn't know if they were poor white trash, what?
Well, let's face it about Faulkner. It's not easy to read. Have you ever tried to read Ulysses by James Joyce?
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times I've started that and given it up. Some of them are just, my book is not literature. It's just a story, you know. It's very easy to follow. But yeah, I
I'm a very great admirer of
and he's definitely worthy of being admired. You know, and he lived in Oxford, Mississippi, where the University of Mississippi is. And we actually visited his home, which is over the public. And he would write sentences, and it's one of the problems I have with Faulkner. He would write sentences that were paragraphs long, you know. It's just I find that it's like Jonathan Franz's book, The Corrections. I don't know if you've ever read that, but the whole book, it's like a 600-page book, and the whole book is like 4 chapters. And it's just like, you just have to put a bookmark in the middle of a sentence bracket when you close it for the night, you know. I don't find that easy to read. I've got one long chapter in my book, and it's on purpose because I'm trying to lull you to sleep. But most of the other chapters are like 2 or 3 pages long. So very easy to
Actually, I'm going through a chapter with the for the next, maybe somebody dark about what comes after. A lot of people. What the heck, have to read the next chapter, yeah.
Well, I'm a reader. I read a lot. And one of the things I was very cognizant of when I was writing this book was reader comfort. I wanted my readers of my book to be comfortable as they read, and to be pulled through and not wonder what was going on, you know. Like I said, it's an art form that I'm new to. But I do read a lot. Anybody else? Thank you all for coming on a. Yep, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.